Okay, today I'll be sitting down with Karen Greenblatt. She's an art therapist at the Place, the Jerusalem Center for Emotional Well-Being, and she'll be running a support group for women who are progressing in the next stage in their recovery from the traumatic experiences they've gone through. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today, and also getting to know Karen a little bit better. So thanks so much for sitting down with me today, Karen.
Thanks for having me.
So the support group you're going to be running, who's it geared for? Who's it most useful for? What can participants expect to get out of their experience?
Okay, so the support group is a safe space. It's a group. It's a group therapy session for women who, like you said at the introduction, who have already taken the first brave steps to confront the effects of their experience with trauma and are now looking to further explore ways in which to strengthen their self esteem and confidence, to reconnect with their inner voice, and to rebuild their motivation to better cope with their everyday life. In other words, they're moving from just surviving
Mm,
to being able to thrive.
okay. What usually are people coming in with that might be a part of this group?
Well, women who have gone through traumatic experiences, it could be anything from a divorce to a death to an encounter with some type of abuse.
Mm,
Those would be the traumatic experiences that these women have gone through.
yeah, yeah. What got you interested in working with people who've gone through such horrible experiences like that?
Well, my experience is being in working in the public sector with families from the revacha, from the
Mm.
social what's revacha in English? Help me out here.
In social services.
Social services, thank you. Yeah, and I met whilst working there a wide spectrum of the population of people who have gone through all these types of experiences, and I mainly was so impressed with the women who are still holding on to their own lives and to the lives of their children
Mm,
after having experienced, whether it be the unfortunate experiences of acrimonious divorce or unfortunate violence or any type of abuse. And I never went looking for these stories. They came uh, to my door where I was working through the social services,
mm.
and I was constantly amazed at the resilience of these women and the strength that the human spirit just kind of shines through. And that gave me a lot of confidence to work with these stories. So I kind of got a lot of inspiration from the women
Hmm.
and was less, I was kind of less pulled down by the horrors of the stories because they are horrific and terrible stories. But I was very much inspired by the women themselves and their resilience and their desire to find ways in their own unique way to thrive.
Sure, sure. And I mean, it's work in general with the Revachah. I mean, just on top of just the difficulty inherent in being a therapist. I mean, it's a pretty tough gig working in the Revachah. I mean, what made you say, I want to get into bureaucracy that limits me horribly and overworks me and doesn't really, like how did you get into that?
Well, I got to say, if I would have thought about that first, then perhaps I wouldn't have. But I'm lucky that I didn't think about that because, um, maybe because you get like I said before, you get a wide spectrum of people and of human experience. And at the end of the day, it's just people,
Yeah.
and we all experience these things in some way or another. People go through traumatic events, whether it's at that end of the scale or at this end of the scale. Um, and yeah, I just I wanted to work with people. I wanted to work with families. I wanted to see how women manage with children, especially children who are kind of innocent. They kind of been born into a situation which is not of their choosing.
Mm.
And these are normative children, and how do these women and where do they find the strength to help deal with these kids? So that was also something that gave me a lot of strength.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I Yeah,
Yeah, and art therapy is pretty unique also in terms of being like I mean it's a bad way of putting it, like more of a somatic, like full body, imaginative experience. But what I mean, what attracted you to art therapy? And maybe even just even describe a little bit
yeah,
about, maybe the difference between art therapy and, classic, one-on-one talk therapy.
yeah. Well, art therapy is actually really perfect for trauma because anyone who's gone through a trauma can understand that the first thing they kind of lose is a linear narrative
Mm,
explaining to themselves what happened. It's not you have this like flight or fight response, and the verbal does not yet kick in. Certainly not at the beginning stages, even in the secondary or third stages. That doesn't yet kick in there.
yeah.
And so art, which is obviously a visual medium, is very, very helpful to people who have lost a linear narrative and cannot yet find the words to explain to themselves or clarify to themselves what they've been through. Um, Also, art is is just positive, and it really builds on your confidence. You make something with your own hands. You've created something. It immediately gives you back your sense of strength.
Mm,
Also, it emphasizes your unique voice.
yeah.
No one is going to make whatever sculpture that only you are going to make it in your way. So it returns your uniqueness to you. It returns your strength. It returns your confidence. It brings positivity back to a situation which is not positive, but it builds your positivity. So art is also, art is about building, literally.
Mm,
That we can build things, we can break them down, and then we can reconstruct them. And that kind of parallels the therapeutic idea of breaking down what had happened and then trying to reconstruct and rebuild your narrative.
mm,
So you can kind of go through that therapy, but in parallel with actual 3D objects, with actual building things, really building it. Um, so that is it's a very positive thing. And also the last thing I'll say is that art therapy is also about
mm,
play and spontaneity, and that's really really important in any therapy. When you can kind of let go a little bit and
yeah.
allow yourself in a very safe space to be spontaneous and to try things and to play. And nothing's going to go wrong. If the clay doesn't work, you squish it and you try something else. Um, if the paint doesn't work, you just paint it over and you work with something else. Also, art therapy allows you to experiment with different mediums that would suit you specifically. Some people really do not want to paint and they would much rather sculpt. Some people
Mm,
would not want to sculpt and they'd rather use collage. Some people want to work on really small formats, and other people would choose to work on really large formats. So that's also helped the therapist understand who that person is by looking very carefully at their choices.
mm,
What are you choosing to work with? Which medium do you choose? And that is also very positive because you can reflect that back to the person and say, well, I see that you've chosen this. This is your specific voice telling me what what you want. So it's also giving them their ability to choose and take control um, of
mm,
their situation.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of curious about what sort of mediums you work with specifically. I mean, the first thing that does come to mind is, paint and clay, but there's a lot more
Yeah.
that I mean, is movement also part of your work, dance, thing, more of that sort of artistic angle as well, or
Yeah, well, I don't specifically work with movement, but for example, if a participant wishes to work on a really large format, then they would obviously use their whole body. They would stand up. They're not sitting crouched over the table. They would stand up and use their whole body. So yeah, that would be the more physical experience. Also, in terms of materials, like you mentioned, it's not just painting or sculpture, but there's also the use of collage, using ready-made or found objects and finding ways to deconstruct them and then recreate something else. There's also collage, where you use um, photographs or magazine pictures, and you find ways to reflect upon those and to
Mm,
build upon that. There's also art journaling, in which you can
mm,
eventually start putting in words.
yeah.
And I just want to mention about words that towards the end of the process, we certainly reflect upon what we've built with the verbal, because it is obviously very important to reintroduce the verbal and to become confident using words, but this time with
Yeah.
a lot more confidence and a lot more ability to choose, and also recognizing that you're speaking about something you've made.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, hey,
so
it
yeah.
kind of, what you're saying. I guess I'm kind of wondering. You mentioned the episodic memory during a traumatic experience. I think, yeah, Panksepp did a lot of work on that. I mean, that just completely falls apart. There really is no narrative that a person, not all the time, but quite often, it just simply isn't there. It never actually got processed cognitively, and so I mean, what would you say in terms of the it's probably a bad way of putting it because it's not like, well, what objectively happened, but there's more towards healing than say an objective play by play of a story as much as uh, I mean, is there a reconstruction using art therapy given that hindrance, or is more a sense of trying to transcend the current pain a person's in? I mean, how would you size those pieces up?
Yeah, I think that memory is slippery, right? Especially with trauma, that you can't really rely on your memory, and it's broken up. But the aim here is not to reconstruct the memory. The aim is not to reconstruct the story. The aim is to reconnect to self,
Mm,
to connect with how you're feeling now. You know, trauma takes, um, it's kind of, it's difficult. It kind of lives in the past, but it very much affects the present, and it clings to the present so that you can't really move to the future, right?
mm,
It kind of it's all encompassing all the time, and so one of the ways that art therapy helps is really helping the person to be in the kan v'achshav, in the now, right? I am making this piece of sculpture with my hands. I'm feeling the clay on my hands now. I'm standing up and using the whole format now. I'm being mindful of my body now. In other words, you're just reconnecting with
mm,
how you, your body, yourself, your choices, your identity, who you are.
mm.
That's because that's what you're going to need as you move into a future of your choice, of your making.
Is it a part of it is like it is a building of competency almost that's sort of like gaining faith again in who an individual was and could be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question of identity is also really important. I think that's also what you're saying. To be able to say a traumatic experience takes away a person's sense of self. When especially
Mm,
in, for example, a violent or sexual abuse, there's no the identity of the person has been stripped
mm,
away, and who are they now? So in creating art and creating something that you're putting in the world, you're creating a three-dimensional object of your making, putting it in the world, looking at it and saying, this is something I made. And with the help of the therapist and the group, perhaps also reflecting back to that person, oh, I see you. I see you through this
mm.
object. And so it really, really slowly builds up the identity of that person again. And that helps, strengthen self-esteem and self-confidence, with which they can then move
Yeah.
slowly further.
Yeah. I bet that'd be the power of the group is that the whole group is seeing the individual, what they've created, seeing their identity symbolized, an example of their competency, offering that foundational support. Is that, I mean, is that a fair?
Yeah, I think the group definitely, at the beginning, people are quite afraid
Mm,
to show themselves to a group because they're afraid to show themselves to themselves. So
mm,
the group just creates a safe space in which together they're kind of creating by themselves, but they're creating in parallel with other people at the same time in a space that's held and comfortable and safe. As the group moves, um, people will start to hear echoes from other people of what it is that they're feeling, but they
Mm,
can't yet say. So the group really, really helps them verbalize. Certainly towards the end of these kinds of workshops, it helps them to verbalize. At the beginning, it's very quiet, and that's great because at the beginning, you need time just to be with yourself and create. But people by themselves sometimes don't do that, and they
mm,
do need the support of an environment of creativity. It's
mm.
okay to play around with clay.
Yeah.
It's really fine to mess around with gouache. It's all good, and you sometimes need that confidence from the fact that the person next to you is doing it too.
Yeah, that willing to experiment.
Exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
So someone joining this group, what would be a single session look like? What would people be going in and doing? And how long is the group? How long does the group run for?
Sure. So this workshop, it's just a four sessions. Each session is an hour and a half. The beginning of the session is an introduction and just kind of speaking how they're feeling and how everyone comes into the group and what's on their mind at the beginning.
Mm,
And then there is talk as to what type of activity we're going to be doing. And I would offer them various materials based on the activity that I would suggest. And then I kind of leave them to their own devices to work and to play and to create. And then towards the end of the session, we come together and we look
mm,
at what's been made. And those participants who wish to share verbally are welcome, and those who don't have to.
mm,
And every week I will concentrate on a different, a kind of a different technique
mm.
of creative development
Okay,
that can
cool.
help.
How did you get into art therapy to begin with? Like just on the personal level. I mean, and then I mean, the Rebecca is one thing, but like you as a person.
Well, to be honest, my real my real my background for many years is as an artist in fine arts. I have my degree in fine arts, and I've been working as an artist for many years and still today. And whilst working, I also taught. I would have groups of people from age 8 to 80. They would
Mm,
come into my studio and just paint. Um, and it was a kind of chugim or sessions or lessons, but it was kind of less lessons for me, and it was more. I found that people really enjoyed being in a studio,
mm,
and they really enjoyed just expressing themselves. And I guess after a while, I realized, well, this is very therapeutic, and I could see that people were expressing and telling things about themselves that I guess they weren't telling me in other ways, but through their
mm,
art they were. And so after a while, I decided I needed to get a little bit more professional tools
mm,
in terms of how to actually move from just enjoying these people expressing
yeah.
themselves naturally through art. And I wanted to get some more, professional therapy tools so that I could help more people in this way.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So before we wrap up, when is the actual support group? Where is it taking place? The dates, the times.
Okay, so it's taking place at the place, which is in Ramat Eshkol. Um, and it starts on Sunday the 7th, from 10 o'clock in the morning to 11:30 in the morning is a session. It's an hour and
Mm,
a half.
okay, okay. Tova, it was really nice talking with you, and it sounds like it's a really amazing program that you put together, or an amazing group that sounds like people will. It sounds like it has a lot to offer, and looking forward to
So
hearing
yeah,
about it.
it should be fun.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
thank you.